Around here. All rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to open the agenda because we have to make modifications to that. And then, so I can make some changes. So I need a motion to open the agenda. Can I have a second? Second. Okay, all in favor of doing that? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so I'm going to add, after we review the schedule of meeting dates, approval of the minutes, a presentation by Ben Winokur. I'm going to bring him up to the stage to come to help us with the DPW new plans.
Okay.
At Fort Path. And then I also have an invoice from Antonozzi Associates that we just need to approve as a committee. So those are the two additions. So I just thought I'd get rid of those at the very beginning. That's okay with everyone. The minutes, our last minutes of our late meeting was on November 20th. They've been distributed to everybody. I got extra copies if someone would like to.
Yeah.
Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second? Second. Any discussion or comments on the minutes? You need a copy?
I'm going to abstain because I wasn't at the meeting, so.
Yes, you were. This is from November.
Oh, November. Oh, okay.
Yeah, but we didn't have a quorum back in
for
December. Here's. Sorry. Take a minute. A pretty quick meeting. We started at 6:30. We were out at 7. So.
Yeah, this is just.
Okay. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you. On the second page of the agenda for today is a series of meeting dates that we need to approve as a committee for the next year. Basically, we're meeting on the third Thursday of every month at 6:30, starting February 19th, March 19th, and so on and so forth. I'll move to approve these 12 meeting dates. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any comments or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No? Okay, great, thank you. Next item on the agenda is a presentation by Ben Winokur on the DPW. So, Ben, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Peter, you're gonna pull it up on
Yep.
there?
Pull it up.
Here, hold on a second.
So while he's getting that started, so what we're calling this is a site consolidation concept review for 16 Fort Path Road. And the overall goal of this project concept is to bring public works and beach and recs maintenance operations together on one site. And it's funny, that's the old version where I have it as Fourth Path, but that's Fort Path Road. So this is the existing DPW facility. So I have with me tonight Austin Hall, who's the Director of Beach and Recreation and Senior Services, and Sam DeBurrow is the Executive Director of Operations for the town, who, among other things, oversees DPW. So this project has been kind of years, it's been brewing in the background for years. I jumped in a couple months ago and wanted to just kind of get together all the different pieces and recreate some history here, because as these projects sometimes grow and change directions, you kind of lose sight of what some of the original tenets were or why you did what you did. So it was a good exercise to go through and put some background to this. If you want to go to the next slide. There are basically 4 main iterations of this project, started back in even before February 2022. What's that?
Goes way back.
Yeah, it goes way back
before
there.
that.
Actually, 2012 is when the facility was expanded, had a maintenance garage attached onto it.
Sit here, by the way, I know they're trying to see, and this is kind of geared towards the board, so. if you
Maybe
want-
Yeah, come on around.
Well, no, I'm just saying our guests, because
Oh,
they
okay.
can't see what you're looking at, and it's set up more for the board, so.
Draw me out again.
Yeah, because I can see his peering around.
Yeah, no, it's fine. So back in 2012, when the facilities was expanded, there was actually a phase 2 back then that wasn't executed, and that was putting on an additional 5 bays. So really, there's some unfinished business from the 2012 plan. But anyway, get to February of 2022. A feasibility study was conducted by Stantec, and they were laying out options to expand the DPW garage. And the goal was to consolidate DPW, beach and rec, and a little bit of storage for emergency management, all on one site. So this is getting beach and rec out of the surf club, their maintenance operation out of the surf club, and consolidating them on one, let's call it kind of industrial site. We'll talk about some of the reasons why it makes sense to use that site a little later. But most key thing this project aims to do, and always has aimed to do, besides consolidating the operations, was to get all the rolling stock indoors. Right now, we keep a lot of equipment and vehicles outside, especially down in the saltwater environment, and it's just not a place where you want to leave vehicles outdoors. So we want to get everything inside. Get the beach and rec out of the surf club, replace the salt shed. If you guys have driven by there lately, but the salt shed is like a sprung structure now, and it is it's beyond its life, to say the least. And also another very important thing from an employee standpoint is to provide bunk and break facilities for the employees. Fortunately, the trend in public works has been getting away from the old school method of when guys are breaking, when they're doing a 16 to 24-hour shift, even sometimes even more. With plow operations, they used to sleep in their trucks. We've been, as DPW facilities around the state and around the country have been renovated, they have proper crew quarters where they are able to get some rest, usually at a 2 to 4 hour clip during storm operations, or they cycle folks through. So we want to provide that for our employees as well. Sleeping in trucks is not a safe practice nor an acceptable
How
one.
often does that occur? You need the overnight kind of sleeping.
Multiple times a winter.
What is it, 10 times, 20 times a year, 50 times a year?
Let's hope not. But yeah, I would say it's probably 10.
Yeah,
10.
7 to 10 is norm
Yeah.
for overnights. So that was the original charge. So Stantec went at it, and what they did was, in order to get all these buildings on site, and so they were going to put a beach and rec building. There was going to be the expanded DPW space, renovating for crew facilities, and then a separate garage for emergency management storage. What they did was it was called the one level plan, because the site is relatively flat, and then it goes up a pretty steep embankment and goes back and dips back down to the train tracks. So in order to get everything on one site, they're excavating into this bank pretty significantly, to the tune of, the project had about $3 million in today's dollars of site work in it. So some sticker shock back in 2021 of 7.8 million to get that done. And especially with all that site work, there are contaminated soils on the site, mostly arsenic, I believe, which the regulations don't require you to get rid of it if you can reuse it on site. But with this plan, they were digging everything out. There's nowhere to put it. So you have to truck that stuff off site and pay for it. So move on to October 2023. And this kind of took place between 23 and January of 25. Stantec was re-engaged to build upon what their original study, and their charge was to provide options to limit excavation, earth moving. And really what they came up with at that point was what we now call the 2-level plan. So this put Beach and Rec had a shed that they were going to keep some rolling stock and small equipment under, and the salt shed up on the 2nd level. It didn't have the emergency management storage building anymore. And it had Beach and Rec in a separate building, let's call it the lower level of the site. So a couple problems with that. Emergency management somehow got left out in the cold. there were significant inefficiencies with employee space because the concern at the time was you have two crews that are in two different locations and you have some redundancy of facilities. Two break rooms, two kitchens, all that. And then the original estimate was then inflated to $9.3 million. At that point. So go from 7.9 in the original plan to 9.3 in 2025 dollars. The two-level plan, when you add back in emergency management, was 8.3 million. We'll get into some of the finances later. This is just really high level.
Did that plan also have that major excavation?
No, so that one had much more limited excavation. That's how they were stacking things on two sites. So instead of having one level site, you had a two-tier site. Not the best for traffic pattern. It made the lower level pretty congested. So that was some of the feedback they received at that time. Now we go to October 2025. Said, okay, let's do like a hybrid option here. Let's try to get as much as we can on one level, but let's try to reduce excavation. Let's try to reuse all the material we can on site. Let's try to right size the employee facilities and have a really good flow on site. So this led to this hybrid option. So they presented that in October 25, is right about when I started getting involved in the project, and there were some issues with that. It had the Beach and Rec building now attached to the expanded DPW building, one long building. But it was downsized to the point where it now didn't have any admin space or employee facilities. So let's call it the DPW side did. Well, if you have 14 employees that are bunking, breaking, working out of a site, and you're going to move it, let's just use the numbers. We'll use it. We're going to say we're going to double it to 28 when Beach and Rec is there. You got to double that square footage. Maybe you could save a little space by having one counter for the coffee pot and the microwave, but you still need two different crew spaces. So it really doesn't matter if it's on one side of the building, you have two smaller spaces on either side of the building, or one large space. This had neither of those things. It had one small space. So that's a non-starter. That's one of those original project goals that now wasn't being met. So they were up to they were down to 8.1 million, up from the 7.8 in 2022, but down off the 9.3 in the revised. So we're heading the right direction cost-wise, except for inflation. But since we didn't have that admin space, it also didn't have any Beach and Rec admin space, so no offices, no nothing. So went back to them one more time, said, hey, we have to come up with a concept that works for everybody and put a pin in this and start our planning process financially. So we tasked them with incorporating Beach and Rec as a mezzanine in one of the expanded buildings instead of building an entire new building. And then also sizing it to ensure all the original goals were met. So
when you say mezzanine, you're adding a second floor?
Yeah, so the building was always going to be a two-level building, and again, we haven't done elevations on it, but it was going to be probably a low pitch roof where we moved to a higher pitch roof and actually stacked the mezzanine in there. So what we wanted to do, Peter, can you switch the slide? I was getting out of myself with the goals. So we wanted to blend the advantageous elements of prior concepts into a cost-effective design. We wanted to ensure, again, that all of our rolling stock and equipment is able to be stored indoors or under cover. So one of those sheds disappeared, that had to get back in. We wanted to accommodate admin space and crew quarters for both DPW and B&R without increasing building footprint. Because again, when you get everything on one site, it was stacking up the site and making it hard to traverse around. So what that concept looks like now, next slide, is this. So the beauty in this, point a little bit. The beauty of this plan is the old excavation, when we did the one level plan, was basically coming back to about here. The two level plan was bringing it to about here. Now we've split the difference. This is a berm here, grade lines over here. So these buildings are kind of now built into the berm. These are all level, nice level spot, good areas to traverse around. There's a retaining wall here to hold back, the actual, we're digging into this slope and putting a retaining wall in. And then this area here is basically a light, let's call it a mound, of all those contaminated soils that were on site, we could reuse them right there. We'll, make it look pretty obviously, but we don't have to take them and truck them off the site. So emergency management building is here. Salt storage facility is here. This is the beach and rec shed. I have a breakout slide of what goes in there, but that's like tractors and equipment like that. So it's not a four-walled structure. It's open in the front. The beach and recreation building with the mezzanine on top is here. The 5-bay addition, which is exactly the same size it was in 2012's plan. Actually, on a bunch of these plans, when I jumped in the project, it was called Phase 2. And it wasn't until like a week ago when Sam enlightened me that Phase 2 was actually part of the original plan from 2012. This is the existing DPW garage, no change to that. And then this is the existing DPW, the old 1940s building that gets renovated with DPW crew quarters and their small offices in there. Obviously restrooms as well. So really good plan, nice clean site. We don't have to move the fuel island, which is over here. We don't have to move where the generator, like everything. It keeps a lot of stuff, or the generator is actually over here, sorry. We don't have to change a lot of the site elements. And for people that are driving by the site, again, it's always kind of been an industrial site. This will clean it up a lot. You're not going to have stuff sitting outside. It's going to be very neat and clean. There actually isn't space on the site anymore to have the old dumping ground that seems to pile up at any DPW facility. They're infamous pack rats, but don't tell myself.
What's the current square footage of the site versus what's the new square footage?
I think I've got that down here. I will. And if I don't, I'll pull it up on a spreadsheet in a minute. Go to the next slide. I'll pull it up, double update it as well. So this is some square footage. This is the breakout of the beach and rec shed and mezzanine. So the shed is 1,400, or about 1,500 square feet. Just shows how the tractor's stuck in there. Part of that planning process, they worked with Austin and Sam's crews and really drilled into like, what exactly are you keeping in one of these? We're not just building space for space's sake. It has to have something that's going to live in it. And then this is the 1,200 square foot mezzanine that'll have bunk space, break room, offices, 2 bathrooms, and a small kitchenette. Again, on top of the expanded beach and rec maintenance facility. Next slide. I'll grab those square footages at the end for it.
And are these all on slab basically?
Yeah, these are all no basements or anything like that. So what this slide does is I know there's a lot of data and numbers on here. It walks you through the iterations of this bill of this process. And so we could kind of do a good, baseline comparison. Everything has been escalated to $2025. So you can see the original design, very site work heavy. It's a very high level grouping here. So we have site work, then architectural and other. That's like everything else. Stantec total was the pricing that they gave us on their estimating form, which got very granular. We can share that with you if you'd like. I added design and then 10% for FF&E. I added design at 10% and FF&E at 200. Again, these are conservative budget numbers. So if we were going to right now put something in our capital improvement plan, the original design would be 10.3. So nice thing about that plan, it hit all our project objectives. It kept everything on one level, looked nice, good ease of maneuvering, but had a ton of excavation. We had to export soil. It had the greatest unknown for potential contaminants. The more you dig, the more you could possibly find. And of course, it was the most expensive option. The January 25 redesign, you see we're down, I'll just talk total cost at this point. We're down to about 9.4 million. Pros was now we have beach and rec in their own building and limited excavation. We got emergency management shed back in there, but there wasn't really a good spot for it in that 2-level plan. The cons were now you have 2 distinct levels. You have less than ideal traffic patterns. The beach and rec building, I know you don't see that plan in front of you, but it was almost like an obstacle to maneuver around. It was very awkward. The salt shed was very difficult to access and load up on the upper levels, like one way in, one way out. And it still required export of some contaminated materials. October 25's design, now we're down to 9.0, but this plan really is the one that didn't work for anybody. Good news was it was one level except for emergency management. It had good flow. There was no soil export. We used it all on site, but the Beach and Rec building was downsized, which is okay. It was attached to DPW and lower building costs, but it lacked that admin crew spaces. Then we get to our current plan, which is the concept you just looked at. We're at $9.8 million for that. Has all the same benefits of the October plan, but it accommodates Beach and Rec and the mezzanine. So this plan actually hits all those original project objectives. Obviously, slightly higher cost than the 2-level, but we are still less than the original design. So it's funny when you look at this now, there really isn't a heck of a big difference between 9.0 and 10.3 in the scheme of things. But I think the effort wasn't futile because they really did look at all options and try to do, kind of like, I'd say value engineering, but like most value engineering, it went a little too far and they had to add back to it. But a good exercise to do because it really, first of all, focused in on the project goals and made sure everything was met. It showed some creative solutions to kind of a challenging site. So again, you can look at this and go, wow, that was a lot just to get you within $1 million. But I think it was probably a good exercise to do. So the question now is why expand it at all? Why not move it somewhere else? So this industrial use here, excellent. I'm searching them on my computer thinking you can see it.
Well, you have the breakout of that 6.7 million between construction, soft costs, and contingency.
Yeah, so flip back to the past slide. So again, I've got it broken out on this plan as 2.0 for site work, and then everything else, all the building costs are 6.6. But I have the entire breakout of what's in that 6.6. I could share it. I don't have it on the slide, but I could share it with the committee. And then again, I took that 8.7, added 10% for design, 200 for FF&E. So that same number was applied to everything across the board just to get everything equal. So known accepted use of the property. Everybody's used to it being there. Everybody's used to trucks rolling around there. It's keeping in line with the use of the property since the 1940s. You move that operation anywhere else in town, you're going to have a shock to those other areas. I mean, no matter where you put it in town. It is a relatively central location within town. Meets the goal of accommodating Beach and Rec out of the surf club. We're sharing resources. I mean, one of the reasons why this was looked at in the first place was sharing resources between operational departments that have very similar functions. The way that the duties are split up in town here, the DPW and Beach and Rec, they do maintenance, they do plowing. They have very similar activity, they do mowing. So we're keeping all those things. There's no reason why those two departments can't coexist on the same site. One thing that has been taken care of, it was a cost in the beginning. There was a water main that was actually running through the property. Connecticut Water has now moved to that. It was late last year at zero cost to the town. So that obstacle for development is clear. It also reuses an existing, I did put some square footage in. It reuses existing almost 10,000 square feet of building infrastructure. It avoids any new utility services. Obviously, there are huge costs if you're developing raw land. It avoids significant site work versus developing new land or repurposing something that wasn't an industrial facility like a school. If you exclude the sheds, the total site is $26,563, and the total cost per square foot would be about $369 a square foot. Compared to new construction, if you had raw land you were developing, you'd be around 700 square foot, which is closer to $19 million. Because it's already an established working site, we have funding attached to this. We're gonna, if this concept gains approval, we're actually gonna work this through planning and zoning now to be ready if funding does come down the road, whether it's next month or next year. If it wasn't, you'd be 2 to 3 years, if not more, for any developing plans there. So I think it's a pretty strong case to stay in that area. I'll take any questions while I'll pull out the square footage breakout. So first, let me give you the opportunity if Sam and Austin have anything they want to add or.
Just a question from my end. Hi, it's Vance. I'm just looking at the per foot numbers where do those numbers come from? $700 a square foot, or even $369 for a basic building. you could have pretty luxury house built for that price. Or at least in the marketplace, I'm seeing construction costs, maybe new construction ground up for a basic industrial building, maybe with some finishes of like $125, $150 a square foot. I'm a little curious to see where we find 700 or even for that matter, the 369.
Well, 369 is a calculation based on the estimate. So that's where that came from. 700 is a commercial construction. Again, we're talking very high level budget capital planning numbers. We don't want to go and reconfigure these numbers every year if this thing, takes 2 or 3 years to get funded.
Would it be fair to say that if you took the site work of 2 million out, that 369 would drop down substantially down to around 280, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, anything you pull
I mean,
out.
that's part of why that's at 369 is the site work of $2 million, right?
Yeah, my only comment would be that just I think again, maybe this isn't the way the town. I'm looking at it from a private sector point of view, so maybe it's different here with whatever other requirements you may have, but certainly for new construction for a building as you described with 369 a square foot would be expensive. 700 would just be I would be scratching my head. So I guess that's what I find curious is can you look at some existing construction standards, talk with some general contractors to try to maybe narrow that figure in a little better so that when we do seek funding, at least we have a more accurate, what I would argue would be a more accurate representation of the real cost.
So the 369, again, that's not my number. The part that I added to that was the 10% for design and the 200 for FF&E. The rest of that came from Stantec. And again, I could share the details of their estimates. They didn't have those other costs in there, so I added those on there, and those are all part of that 369. So that's construction, that's FF&E. It's construction, design, and FF&E. And again, these are budget. These are high level budget numbers. I think there's been a really bad track record in town of cutting the knees off of projects at this phase in the game and saying, 369, we could do it for 300. Then we go to fund the project and we're out of money. It's happened every project I've been involved with here. You got to stop at some point.
So I think the other thing is, just from what I've been seeing in the construction market for municipal contracting, which is very different, we have to pay prevailing wage, we have all these other restrictions in terms of how we build. That's 369, that's actually low. I think compared to what we're hearing, and if you talk to a lot of the firms, what was the new school? That was 750 or something, yeah.
New school is over 7. The EOC we're building right now, which is all apparatus space on the first floor.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on the number, but I think we're somewhere around $500 a square foot for that. And that's austere office space on the first floor, and then apparatus on the basement. I haven't seen 369 in commercial. So my fear is the 369 is too low because I haven't seen that in commercial construction. Now, again, I come from the schools world primarily, but I haven't seen that number in any commercial construction. I can't even do interior renovations to a space for that much money.
No. So
I think the difference is what you pointed out that maybe, and that's why I asked the question, is that clearly there's whether it's prevailing wage or the other requirements that a municipality would have that conventional private sector construction wouldn't. That's all. I was just taken aback by the numbers because my numbers are a lot lower.
Well,
a lot more requirements. I get.
Building a house, they quote you $400 or $500 a square foot. If you're building like a residential house, so.
Yeah, I was afraid Stantec's numbers. My first pass at their estimates was like, "Whoa, where are you guys?" Because your numbers are low. But anyway, just to give a couple details about square footage. The new construction, we went through the beach and rec shed is 1,500 square feet. Salt shed is about 3,500. That replaces the existing fabric and block shed on site. I can share this with you guys afterwards too, but emergency management is about 3,500, and that's heated to non-occupancy levels. That's not, 72 degrees in the winter. Beach and rec, the new storage / workshop / admin mezzanine is 6,800. 1,200 of that is mezzanine. The DPW garage addition is 6,225. There's 4,200 square feet of renovation to existing construction. So existing to remain, you have the garage building of 5,775. There's no work in that area. If you take the sheds out, the total existing site is just under 10,000 square feet. Total new construction, excluding the shed, is 16.5. So the total proposed site is 26,563.
Can I ask? Hi, this is Seth, and I apologize. I was late to the meeting. I didn't get the proper link until 6:40, so I hopped on as soon as I could. Um, can I ask? This is only storage for beaches and for beach and rec. It's not office space or program space, right?
It's not program space, but the mezzanine is office space up there. There are, I can't remember.
For building and
So I
grounds,
think,
though.
yeah,
Building
Seth,
and
I think
grounds.
just buildings and grounds, not beach and rec property.
And how big is your team in building and grounds?
There's 10 guys.
10 guys. So you know that little house that sits next to across from Strong Center that was added
Yeah.
10 or 15
years ago.
I mean, that's where those guys are right now in that little modular home that was dropped there.
And their workspace is next to it. And I toured that a couple of weeks ago, and it's
Yeah,
those
Oh,
guys are
that's
doing,
outside.
yeah, those guys are doing a lot with a little.
I mean, not to add and jump in on Ben,
No.
but the workspace garage itself down at Surf Club is primitive at best. You know, not a great environment to do the tasks that we assign these guys. And getting that function out of the surf club and freeing up the most valuable space in town for something else, I think can't be overlooked in the project.
Has it toured the facilities?
Sorry.
Has the facilities committee toured the two
Yes.
facilities? So
Yes.
you've seen the condition that, Public Works now at one bathroom. It's probably, 50 square feet.
Yeah, you
Just
have
out of
female
curiosity.
restroom facilities in there. There's a lot of issues in there, but the beach and rec side, can't really see it on the resolution and the PowerPoint, but I can share the actual power PDF of the site plan where it actually drills into that beach and rec building along the northwest side. It is their workshop space, about 650 square feet. There's loose equipment storage, and then the rest of that building is all packed with actual rolling stock. And then we have the same breakout for when the DPW area on the other side of the building, in their renovated area. It's similar to the mezzanine. There's a small bunk room, 270 square feet, small kitchenette, break room, and then offices and one office and two bathrooms. So it's a small area.
Just out of curiosity, has anybody in the town, I don't know if it's a town question or it's your question, looked into potentially acquiring vacant space that's might be suitable in town, like the Garrity construction site, the Garrity Center, or the Hamanesset Ford?
So my first reaction to all of this 3 years ago was I'd rather just go buy a site and spend all this money on the site. But there was a lot of time and effort. There was some explorations, there was a lot of thinking about it by the staff, and because it's hard, you're spending a lot of money on site work, right? So it's easier, like, I just might rather go write a check somewhere and have a level lot and like that to deal with all this, but there's really not anything that would have, been available to us to do that. And Sam can speak to this, and so I think they felt there were multiple reasons why it was better to keep this site.
I'm just curious. The Garrity site's empty.
You're also you're 2 million in site work in this project. So in the latest plan, you're down from 3 million to 2 million. And if you bought, unless you were buying something that was a fully functioning kind of.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm talking about.
You'd be.
Hamanesset Ford is almost a
Right.
functioning space for you.
Yeah.
The Garrity site's not empty anymore. There's an X-ray company there.
Yeah, they went in there like 3 years ago.
We did approach Seashore Construction, asked him if he was willing to sell.
Mhm.
No.
I'm just curious.
So we looked at a lot of other things. Hamanesset Ford just came up recently, but.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a potential site, but now you gotta add whatever's existing there now, you gotta recreate that again, so that's the price tag.
Well, now you're gonna have another site you don't know what to do with, right? So we're making a stack over here of properties we no longer, that we're trying to figure out what to do with. This is one we have.
That's kind of our job.
That's
What
what
we're
we're
trying to do. is
Yeah, so like,
analysis.
that actually makes your task easier, because this site, we're saying, will work for what we need. So we won't stack up another vacant site over here while we take another space in town. So I think that was something that the crew here kind of sold me on as well, is it's functioning, it needs rehab, it needs expansion, and consolidation, and then it'll do what we need it to do. And everybody's already used to it being there. So there's a lot to be said for
I
that.
think it's also in an optimum spot, at least for my crew. It's centrally located to the areas that we work on every day. Hammonasset Ford, you're adding, a few minutes, but a few minutes adds up over a shift in travel time to get to, Surf Club, the high school, Olson. This is a pretty optimal location.
Yeah, that would happen, the emergency services use, with the exception of North Madison, they don't use it to fuel up. So putting it someplace else, that's more travel time for them to go do with everything else.
I'll open it up. Does anybody else that's online have a question, Megan or Nick or Vance? Or do they have questions?
I'm good for right
No, I think
now.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Didn't mean to interrupt.
Nope, I'm okay, Vance. I'm all set for right now. Thank you.
No, I think my only comment would be that certainly looking at other possibilities like Hammonasset Ford, my suggestion might be, again, I would agree with what's been said, because if I was looking at that, highest and best use would probably be for some other car related or retail related use, given its location, versus something that doesn't require the visibility, which is what we're discussing about now.
All right, well, with that, thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Very helpful. And we'll obviously incorporate this in our whole planning.
Sounds good.
sequence.
All right. Anytime you need more info, you know where to find me.
Thanks, Ben.
If you can break out those construction versus solid.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll send the estimate, around computer. You can have the whole thing.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is we have an invoice for Antonosi's work. The first invoice is for $3,110. Their total contract.
Contract 65.
No, there were 60, the TPA was 65.
65.
They were, I don't know, it was 23,000, I think it was. So this is like 12 or 15% of their total contract. So I'm going to move that we approve this. They've been really working very well, very hard. So can I have a second?
Second.
Any other comments by anyone? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Okay. Next item is an update on and discussion of Memorial Town Hall Committee. So I'm going to turn this over to John. We have several slides. There was they prepared a document that says.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Did you improve TPAs too?
I did not get one for TPA.
That's nosy.
That's all that you said.
Okay,
Do you have one for TPA?
I do.
Bring it up.
Yeah, I'll bring it up right now. One second here. Here. TPA, I'll share this. How much is? It's $16,250.
So that's about a 15, 20%. They've generated, two major reports already. So I think that's fair. So I move to approve, TPA's invoice of 16,000.
Yep, $16,250.
I'll second it.
Any other comments? Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. So if you could bring up, there's a file called the, that I gave you, Peter. It looks like this. It's called the 2025-12-17 Madison Progress Report.
Yeah, let's get that up here.
I'm going to turn it over to John. We've been having a series of things, so I'll have to update on is when we get on to Jeffrey. But just for background for everybody, Antonozzi's been working on Memorial Town Hall, Jeffrey and Ryerson. And we're going to talk about Memorial Town Hall first. We'll talk a bit about Jeffrey.
What did you want here?
It's called the 2025-12-17 Madison Progress.
Madison Farms, got it.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, and you put that up on the screen. This is the document.
Oh, right, okay. Yep.
Go ahead.
Okay, Memorial Town Hall, as David is saying, Antonozzi is working on Memorial Town Hall, but also on Jeffrey and Ryerson. But Memorial Town Hall is kind of the linchpin of our hypothesis on some of these other facilities. And we made them aware of that looking at Memorial Town Hall with an eye towards renovating it to be what it originally was, namely a former performing arts facility or a gathering facility or a theatrical facility. Aiming to do that, turns out in their initial exploration, code-wise, it could make really good sense. Their occupancy changes a little bit, sent from assembly, one classification of assembly to another, but changes so little that it really doesn't affect anything code-wise and makes it pretty well set up to comply the way it is. Additionally, because it's on the National Historic Registry, it's gives code officials and gives the town the ability to use that to cover some of the regulations that would be in place. So there's a lot of good reasons to think this is a good way to go. And what they've done so far, and you can see in the picture down in the lower left there, what they're developing is a concept that will allow for about 200 seats, most of which are here on the main level. And that seating is permanent seating, but it's retractable. So it's retractable, it can get out of the way for other activities that might take place inside that part of the facility. Back behind it, raised up, is be another row of seats that I believe would be fixed. And then ancillary building activities would be ready. Additionally, there is a good thought of putting a small cafe in the lower level, very lower level, with theater support in the old powder house. Or it might be vice versa. The cafe and powder house are the theater support in the lower level. And I think there's a couple of different ways to look at it. But basically, as David pointed out, Antonozzi is working hard on this. We're having meetings every other Tuesday. We meet with them and some of the committee, and we're very carefully keeping track of what they're doing.
So the positive thing on this is that it's passing what appears to be the code restrictions. That would be the biggest piece. And because it's on the National Historic Register, we'll also have opportunities to comply with a number of other things in a more lenient fashion. So that's important. There's another document called the preliminary they just sent me today that actually gives you a little bit more of a, it's called 2025-12-19 Memorial
Gotcha.
Town Hall Preliminary.
There it is.
So this is basically the site plan, and the grades and those kinds of things, and they, on an overview, maybe you can blow up the left-hand side of that. So this is kind of the existing structure, of what's happening here.
I'm gonna scan over here. Yeah.
Just slide over. On the first floor, and then the right is the second floor. If you scroll down to the next page,
Now, okay.
yeah, see the keep going. Should show up seating layout and the kind of idea they're thinking of a movable structure. There we go. Keep going down.
There you go.
There you go. So this is the kind of the seating layout is there. There to the right is the seating structure. They're talking about a movable seating structure, totally unlike what's at the high school. We've already had a major discussion on that.
I was just there last night.
Yeah.
And it's terrible. They have these metal railings attached and it's like
Cracks.
every time you,
And then,
so.
and then with the theater elevation, they're actually thinking that what would happen in the main level, these seats would retract under the balcony so that you would have an open
Right in here.
floor space that would be open for, if you wanted to do some sort of event, a town ball or something like that, or that kind of a thing. And the stage area would be right at if you scroll down a little bit further, the stage area is right at the floor level. So they're this is some of their preliminary thinkings. They're certainly at the point now of around 200, or pushing them to try to come up with maybe 220 seats, kind of keep it in the compatible to what the Cate's looking like.
By comparison, the Cate has, I believe, 285. Iverton has 274, so we aren't gonna be up at that level, but we're gonna be in pretty good shape, as David says, probably some more.
Yeah, and the next step now with this is to kind of try to put some costs to this.
And at the same time, they're also working on structural and mechanical upgrades and so forth that we can do. Stantec is looking at the septic system issues. So these things are ongoing in the background while these concepts are being developed.
And I think we just want to highlight, if anybody's looking at this is a concept, right? So,
Totally, exactly,
you know, this is just
exactly.
trying to get an idea of feasibility. So, you know, not to focus on like, I don't like this setup, or I don't want this room used for that.
Exactly.
This is more, could you actually do this?
That's why I was using the word concept.
Yeah.
That's really what this is.
Because sometimes people get too focused on the detail. We went down that rabbit hole, you know, sometimes. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
and we're just this is a feasibility discussion, right, about the building.
Right. So, it's from a feasibility standpoint, from a code and construction feasibility, those things are looking positive right now, in general. We don't have any cost estimates yet, because that's a big part of the feasibility thing. And we haven't really dealt with any of the site issues, in terms of parking requirements, those kinds of things yet. So those are the other couple, issues that are out there. We are looking at potential parking where the basketball courts and next, that area behind Memorial Town Hall, adjacent to the academy. You're probably gonna need, between the front of the front of Memorial Town Hall and along Academy Street, that area, you're probably gonna need upwards of 100 spaces, maybe even more. Also, this is tied into the septic for Academy, right?
Yes.
So,
No,
What,
no,
Memorial?
no, no. Memorial Town Hall has
Well,
its own septic
They
system.
do, I'm sorry, yes, that's correct. I keep going back to the original plan they had.
Yeah, we had talked about trying to do that.
Each building having an individual tank and then sending it all up.
that's
So you're right, it is.
Yeah, right now it's its own septic
Every
system.
every site has its own septic.
and we have not looked at any of
Yeah.
that kind of feasibility costs like
Right.
I don't think either. So,
Right.
with that, are there any questions that anybody has on from the panel?
Just a comment. Another thing we have to consider, which I know we're looking at a feasibility plan here, but there are current town offices in the building that would need to be relocated if we were to convert this to a theater purpose or a theater use. Thank you.
That is accurate. It's part of the discussion too, is what's gonna happen. That's why this whole part of the feasibility thing is kind of pivotal. Get Memorial Town Hall to feasibility kind of looked at seriously. And you're right, those offices need to go somewhere else. So that's part of what we're looking at with all this.
Did you, by any chance, based on the last meeting, were able to set up a meeting with the probate court yet?
No, I have not done that. We have our future probate judge on.
I know.
No, I.
Welcome, Seth. We haven't seen you in a while. So
Right, yeah.
good to see you.
Thank you.
Was I supposed to do that for the consultant?
Yeah, at the last Tuesday
Yeah, we
meeting,
talked
you said
about
that
it,
you were
yeah.
going to do that. I got the meeting with Dr. Cook.
Yeah, my bad. I gotta do that. I'll follow up.
Okay.
But it's with the consultant, right? It's not with the committee, or is it for the committee, a working group to do it?
It would be for probably one or two members of Antonozzi and probably myself
Okay.
and John to
Yeah.
meet with
Yeah,
the
I
probate
just
judge.
over the holidays, I lost that. So, okay.
Okay.
Okay, I can do that.
I
Peter.
plan to be in on that meeting with them when they do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the purpose, just so Seth understands, is just to understand the space and the needs.
What are the square footage requirements? What
Yeah.
works in the space? What doesn't work in the space?
Regulatory, obligations, things like that too,
We're getting from Peter's putting together for us all the square footage components for the probate court for the Edwards
With the
archives
existing
as well.
office spaces now.
and also for the Board of Ed, which I'll talk about doing. So, and yes, we're well aware that this is part of the building blocks of where things are going.
Jeffrey with them.
Any other questions or comments on Memorial Town Hall?
I'm good.
Okay, with that, let's move on to Jeffrey. If you go back to this document that the previous document. No, not that one. There's another one. It's called 2026 115 Madison Jeffrey graphic notes.
Got it.
All right, the first page of that is the overview site. Our view right now is that, and I'm going to jump in on this. Megan, you can jump in with me if you can, because Nick's not on the call yet. The portables are targeted to be removed from the site. We don't believe that they're salvageable, and so we want to avoid using those and open the site up for that. At this stage, those arrows look like to be potential pathways between the high school and Folsom that would get to the site, because there would be functions that would be in Jeffrey that would be used for both by both the middle school and the high school. We're thinking a primary entrance that would come in from that arrow from along the tennis courts up there and then come straight down to where the other arrow goes into the building, and we're trying to create an entrance to the building at that area of the site. If you scroll down to the next level, what we've done is we've started to lay out components, maybe blow that up a tiny bit.
Yep.
To the right there, with the red around it, is the Youth and Family Services site. And we've taken the program that was an academy and actually expanded it by about 10 or 15%. This has not been reviewed with them yet, but because we're at the feasibility stage to see if things would fit in Jeffrey. The desirability of this is that it has a separate entrance from the circle that would come in over onto the right-hand side by that blue area, which would be the clinic area. And then it moves into the offices, the conference spaces and things of that nature. What they've done is they've bisected the classrooms there, that orange, that pink area, and they kind of put storage in the middle and made the classroom smaller so you could accommodate offices that way, and created a different transition spaces, which I think was very nice. The second egress would be to the south end there, going into the main part of the building. So that would create that option. If you move over to the right side a little bit more. So at that entrance, hopefully that would be some sort of a welcoming entrance for students, kind of reserving the area that's closest to the and high school as for academic kind of spaces. The yellow spaces would all be for Board of Ed. One of the interesting concepts that came out, this was, we had a conversation with Dr. Cook today and kind of laid out some of these kinds of concepts with him, and which was very positive. One of the things is the cafetorium. If you scroll down a little bit, Peter, on that. The thought is that you have the main entrance to the Board of Ed coming off the circle right where that arrow is. That the Board of Ed conference room would be bisected by the cafetorium. So the stage area and the seating area would be the Board of Ed conference room. And that would allow the remainder part potentially to be a commercial kitchen or some other kind of site. One of the ideas is some sort of commercial kitchen that might be able to tie into our farm, our farm to table kind of concept, and would be potential teaching space as well. So that's kind of there. The orange areas are athletic spaces. So it's the library and the existing gym. Those big open spaces we'd open up for things like fencing, volleyball, live performances, those kinds of things. And then part of those academic spaces in the middle, the atrium, the what do you call it, courtyard there, that would be opened up as an outdoor sitting area for lunches or for conferences or whatever, indoor outdoor space with access off of those office spaces. Part of those academic spaces would also be allowed for storage for things like sets and things of that nature that I know you're having trouble with finding a spot home for at the high school. So we're incorporating a bunch of things into that. One of the ideas is I think you called it markup, where you building things with AI and digital computers.
Makerspace.
Makerspace, yeah. So
Makerspace, yeah.
there's no real specific space anywhere for that in the middle school and the high school. We're thinking some of these classrooms might be designed for that kind of those kinds of functions. So I think in general, the concepts seem to work. So Jeffrey, the key issue here is that Jeffrey, without the portables, is more than adequate space to accommodate Youth and Family Services, Board of Ed, educational spaces that allow us to keep the building done a change of use, as well as athletic spaces and some flex spaces. And you see there's still 3 or 4 big classrooms plus the whole half of the cafeteria that are still flex. And we haven't touched any of like the playground area or anything like that, which would fall into some sort of a potential new build for a new gymnasium, for example, for the high school. Or a pool space or whatever, maybe another athletic space. Any questions about that layout? The next slide was the youth and family services layout. That was the first one you put up there, Jeffrey. It says 1223 YFS.
Yeah.
So that just breaks out the youth and family services in more detail.
What's the total square footage?
53,000 is the total square.
No, I'm
footage.
sorry for using family, they
Um,
for their space. If I recall, the studies had shown at least 6,200, I think was what they were recommending. And I think that's what Academy had in it,
I think more than that.
yeah.
I'm pretty
Some
sure.
were over that threshold.
Yeah, we're beyond that threshold and what he's allowed, that white space right there at the corner at the end is
Yeah.
additional space that's unassigned at the stage.
Which is.
See,
also
they put the square
space.
footages all on the other spots. But they didn't, I mean, they're in here, but
It's
they're
here.
individual.
I see 10,142 square feet down here, right in the waiting area.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's more than enough square footage there. The central offices, right now, the central offices only have about 8,200 square feet. So we're taking almost 2,000 extra square feet in there. And a lot of the central office space is not usable space in there. So this is much more usable space. And because that 10,000 square feet is without corridors, the calculation. So that's important. The educational space is just under 6,000 square feet. And the athletic space is almost 4,200 square feet. So,
Yeah.
And a lot of this is done with relatively modest investment. I mean, we're not talking huge numbers on this because we're not really taking out a lot of walls or anything like that. And one of the reasons they put youth and family services over here is because the way it's structured, you have all the bathrooms already in the rooms in there. They're a little small, so we may have to expand the bathrooms, but you have all the infrastructure of MEP infrastructure in place.
When they're looking at this though, obviously they'll be making recommendations on HVAC, or is that too detailed? Is it just high level, like,
But we know we're going to have to do something on the HVAC because it's going to have to be a piece of that. So we'll have to incorporate that.
That's gonna
I think the roof is going to be a piece.
Yeah.
There's probably going to be some window
Yeah.
issues, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But
And then
in general, it's going to be a heck of a lot cheaper than square footage.
yeah, no, I mean, it's, yeah. No, it's great that they were able to like kind of make it all work with different constituency groups, in separate areas, but yet still give them everything they need. So,
And this frees up, it frees up space out of Memorial Town Hall that Youth and Family Services is, and it frees up space out of the chapel that Youth and Family Services is in. So there's spaces that become available. It frees up over 8,000 square feet here at the town campus as well. So these are all, when you talk about with Seth, when you were talking about the domino effect, this move opens up some other options for us to take care of those other things that may be displaced if Memorial Town Hall is approved. Any other questions or comments?
so the next step is the numbers.
Yeah, next step was, we wanted to be able to, Dr. Cook thought it would be helpful to have maybe another meeting with some of his other people
Yeah.
about this. I think at this stage, we're probably also going to have a conversation with the Youth and Family Services now to show them this and have that kind of perspective as well. So once those two things happen, then we're going,
Yeah.
and if those seem all to be positive moving forward, then we're going to start putting some numbers on this. So we'll see what's involved and timelines. How long it will take to something.
Okay.
I do have a question. There was some thought, and I don't know where it is, and I don't know if this is out of turn. There was some thought of potentially putting some of the Arts Barn activities at Jeffrey. This plan does not seem to include that. Um, it, so my question is that not part of the plan then?
It's still part of our plan. The question is whether Arts Barn stays where it is or potentially moves. We're looking at a potential move to Ryerson, to the cafetorium for the Arts Barn, if that's feasible. We're also potentially looking at the pre-K kind of concept up there on that site as a potential option. So those are things that are totally concepts at this stage. The concern was about the Arts Barn at this site was that it's really a very dedicated space that's owned by them, if you would, and you'd really have to kind of secure it in a way that makes this more difficult to program. Because the only real space would have been the cafetorium, and it kind of throw a wrench into the whole design concepts for the way this was laid out. So we really didn't feel that the Arts Barn fit in this space.
The catalyst for the Arts Barn was if there was going to be potential for a regional dispatch center that would be moved into the Arts Barn facility because it's part of the public safety complex. And that discussion is ongoing right now. There's been no conclusion on whether or not that's on the table still, so.
So it may
I
very
think
well be
the
that the
answer
Arts
to
Barn
that-
stays where it is then.
Yeah, I'm just saying, once we have an answer on that, then, you
Yeah.
know, we need to move the Arts Barn, right? If we're not gonna be using that site.
Right.
Although part of our discussion should always be like, well, what are the other options? You know, always thinking things should be in the best place that are best suited for, it, right?
Right,
But
and
there's no
is some,
catalyst to have to move the Arts Barn. If you don't do
yeah, we do know there are some mechanical and structural issues that need to be addressed in
Right.
that space, but probably can still accommodate the Arts Barn and the Arts Barn in the future with some investment.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, if there's no other questions, I'm gonna move on to the TBA. But before that, there's, if you will, bring up that planning matrix slide.
Which one's this? Oh, yeah, yeah.
Planning
yeah,
matrix,
your
Excel sheet,
Excel sheet, yes.
open up the space planning.
Space plan.
Yeah. So Antonozzi's starting to build this out. We've given this, and as part of our previous conversations and meetings, to come up with a high level look at what the program needs are and where potential homes for these program needs may be. So you can see with the right now the various community and cultural space kinds of issues that are that were kind of originally thought of for Academy and other spaces. We're thinking this is how you would look at Memorial Town Hall, the Powder House, and the chapel. Youth and Family Services, we're assigning to Jeffrey at this stage. The school, academic and athletic spaces, the school would be also the, including the Board of Ed spaces, that's kind of being assigned to Jeffrey. Town office spaces, because it's Board of Ed, would be between town campus and the town offices. Probate court. Question is, where, if it does get moved, does it fit the chapel? We don't know that yet. Could it be Jeffrey? Could it be here at the town campus?
Yeah, I
There should
would
be a-
put that box.
There should be a box there for
Yeah,
the town
town
campus as well.
Uh,
And so we just need to look at that one. The archive, kind of thinking that belongs here at the town campus and in terms of just getting it more public notoriety at the entrance where the Board of Ed would be. So you kind of comes in and you'd see it and have it be more accessible for people in town. The various support spaces, town campus, DPW, bus garage, and vacant lands, those are all sites to do those support spaces. The Arts Barn would either stay here on the town campus or potentially be relocated to Ryerson if the town campus site was not available. Dispatch center, again, that would be town campus or Ryerson. We're looking at support space, meeting and storage kind of spaces. We think Ryerson's a good spot to get, in particular for storage. Low maintenance, low need type of space. And the chapel may be something for that. Affordable housing and development. We were looking at the DPW site as a potential affordable housing site, as well as the vacant lands, which may or may not happen. I think the DPW presentation today was very helpful. And then other kind of smart development, whether it's residential, commercial, or affordable or workforce housing, would be, and that's part of what the lands that we're looking at.
Well, and I would note that when you say Ryerson, there's also extensive parcels attached to Ryerson. I think
Right.
that would be a consideration for development, so I think it's just important to note that, so.
Yes.
Ryerson there in that box, you're talking about the location of the school itself, right?
Correct.
So this table conspicuously lacks a column for academy. So we're purposely not considering academy for any of these uses, right?
That's an agenda item. We've not been involved in the academy discussions. And basically because the Board of Selectmen has kind of shouldered that process with the expression of interest. We've been sitting on the sidelines on that at the moment. I'm hopeful that we're getting to a point where it may be logical for us to get re-engaged at this stage, but that's the reason it's not on there is because we've been kind of set off to the side on that one for the time being until the expressions of interest had a little bit more perspective defined. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue with the academy though is that the expression of business process was to save the building and have it repurposed in some way with outside funds, so the town was not going to pay for development. So all of these are municipal purposes. So
Okay.
I envision having a conversation about academy being here, right, with one of these boxes, because that means the town would continue to fund the building and any renovations and things like that. So the board is taking the new town as the residents have decided they don't want to preserve the building for municipal purposes. So I think when we're ready, I can share some additional thoughts out that agenda.
So yeah, so that's the reason it's not on here at this stage.
Yeah.
With that, it kind of ties into the work that TPA is doing. If you scroll to the next tab, it says property planning. They're actually looking at 14 parcels of land. Maybe I'll slow that up a tiny bit. It's about 150, 180 acres. And they broke it down into 8 sites. They consolidated the Ridge Road 4 parcels to kind of tie it all together. The 14 sites that kind of reduced it down. The first one was a small 2-acre site on County Road, way up north, that was added to this list for us to evaluate at the request of Affordable Housing Committee. We've looked at it. It has not been deemed developable because of the amount of wetlands and the kind of terrain challenges for the space. So we've looked at that. I should just note that they've gone through and have looked at wetlands issues. They've looked at terrain issues. They've looked at whether it was considered municipal open space in terms of designation. by the various state and deep, and then also whether it's natural diversity database and how does it fit for Connecticut water. So that those are some of the basic things they've looked at, and I'll share these reports with you as we go through. They also looked at the nearly 5 acres, which is north of the train station along Durham Road up to the old police station. That area also, because of the amount of wetlands and it's been deemed municipal open space, is really not seen as developable as well. So we're kind of taking those two properties off the table at this stage. The next one is this 1074 Durham Road, which is basically it's an interior lot just north of Ryerson and Brown. It is 20 acres. It's under evaluation. The biggest question is establishing access. There's relatively limited wetlands on this property. And there's potential on different grades to do housing, and maybe it's an expansion of Legend Hill type concept, because it's Legend Hill is literally just due west of that property. So there's potential to do some pretty substantial development there. And the way to establish access on that is potentially through either the south access road into Legend Hill with agreement with them, or go through the Ryerson's site in a way that would create a roadway that would get into that space. I should note that that idea of municipal open space is a designation that the town can adjust. We have flexibility to modify that, according to them at least. The next property is the Town Campus Learning Center that's under evaluation. They really haven't been able to get at it that much. They really need to get it on site. It's hard until the portables are removed, till we see what's going on there. It's potentially available for town functions. It could be fields. It could be a number of things. So and given its proximity to the adjacencies of other properties, that's an interesting parcel to look at. The bus garage was interesting. Although there's substantial wetlands on the site, we think that it can be expanded on the north end of the property, the northwestern end of the property, to get more bus parking. And then you can expand that space to the south end of the property, southeast property, if you wanted to expand that building to get more space for that building. So right now, they looked at it as that's probably the best use for that site, is to keep the bus garage there, but with some modification. So the good potential for development. Ridge Road, there's 99 acres, of which about 24 or 30 acres is the stump dump that's up there. It's under evaluation. There is potential there. The question is wetlands, really getting in and verifying what the degree of wetlands. There is a small river that goes through those properties. How does it coordinate with existing functions is important. Many of those spaces are also identified by municipal open spaces. It's also in the natural diversity database, which is DEP. When they looked at it, though, they didn't find any title, or when they went in the titles and they went the town databases, they couldn't find any designation that did that. So they're not sure that that's an accurate designation. The interesting thing is they believe there's Connecticut water available on those sites because of the fire hydrants along the road, Ridge Road, but they're not positive yet. They got to validate that. The next site is Cops Road, which is the east of Bauer Farm across Cops Road. There's almost 23 acres there. There's some solid potential there. The core question is now going to a septic and wetlands assessment. There'd be wetlands that would be down the middle of the site. And how can you develop it within the concept of there's a small little river and a pond that goes kind of down the middle of the site. So it does have Connecticut water. It is, again, it's got that those other two designations on it as well. And then finally, the DPW site is, they've looked at as well, and we just had a long conversation on it. That's the summary of these. And let me just show you what the documents they've generated here quickly. There's a document 1218 preliminary.
Buildable area.
Yes. And Vance, jump in on this if I'm missing something, because you've been involved in several of these comments and conversations.
Okay.
That's document. So I've kind of summarized in that table all this verbiage that's out here, but just so you can see, if you scroll down to page 3, there's a graphic that shows all the sites where that they've been going through. And then they went down, and if you go to the next one, for example. Yeah, just scroll there. This is the county road site, and so you can see they have a train. The blue areas are the wetlands issues, train issues, and those kinds of things. The frontage, side yard, they have sides, and they also have designations of who owns properties on either side. Scroll down a little bit more. This next property is the property north of Brown and Ryerson. You can see Legend Hill, that's just to the east, just to the west of that. The only real wetlands area is in the far south end of that property, which is solid. There are some terrain changes there, but there are opportunities, it seems, to be building on the north and also on the southeastern ends of these things. Core question is how to get access, and you see this road that goes into the bottom of the lower roadway. If you highlight that, Peter,
It's just in here.
Right here.
Yep, in here.
So that roadway goes down to as a secondary access to Legend Hill. It's also down to service where they have their propane farm and their water wells, things of that nature. So that's one potential. You can see where Ryerson is. Maybe there's another way to get in that way, or potentially coming in through the Brown site. So this is the kind of level of detail. We'll provide that report to everybody so you can see. And then they've come up with the next one was the.
Hey, before we move on to the next one, the one thing I would say with my Board of Ed hat on is any use for that property that's kind of bound against the Brown School property there should be consideration given to the fact that it needs to be a use that is compatible with being next to a school. And it's a pre-K to 5 school, so.
Mhm.
Like senior living might be compatible, but a prison wouldn't be.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we definitely see this as a residential space.
Yeah.
We don't see it as, go from there. It's a market level, market rate kind of residential space. There's a next document, which is the 1230 buildable area.
30 buildable area studies.
So basically, this goes through all the sites after those other documents were there, and it lays out all of all the comments of verbiage is what I kind of summarized in that tape, if you don't mind. So I can't. So it was really going to be hard to go through all this in a public meeting, so that's why I thought the table would be a little bit cleaner. Okay. So that's the TPA, and Jeffrey, Ryerson, and Memorial Town Hall update. Are there any questions or comments about that? Seth, I appreciate that comment on that one site about school adjacency is important.
Is there, the other thing I was just trying to think of, like utility access,
That's what they're looking at next.
yeah, okay. That's-
Well,
yeah,
septic,
water, septic.
power, those are the kinds of things that they'll be looking at because by triaging them down into not developable, some developed,
Yeah,
then are good development, that kind of focuses their attention about the next steps about what they're looking at.
so when they do septic though, how are they making that assessment? Because I thought that's like a whole other process to go through.
Well, they're actually on site on that, and that's what they've, Mike Harkin is a civil engineer who does septics and is well known in town. He's on their team, and he'd be the one that's going to be going in and doing
Okay,
that.
so they'll have an expert going and.
Yeah.
I forget what was part of the scope, so but that is.
Yeah, so that's in the scope. of
Like
it.
some
So,
sort of soil testing.
yeah,
or-
we're now into the whole going out and getting to the site visiting.
Yeah.
I think we've kind of done the kind of high level look
Right.
from all the existing documentations from the Connecticut DEP, town documents, GISs, their stuff, all that kind of stuff. And now a lot of this is going to go out and be verified in site. So now we have it down to about 6 sites that we really want to verify.
Mhm.
And we probably should talk about whether we want them to really spend time, like, for example, at the DPW site. I think I probably want to put that on the side burner right now.
Mhm.
But, and like Nathan's Lane, that's certainly, they don't need to spend an awful lot of time there. I mean, this site on Cops Road, the site on Durham Road, the town campus site, and Ridge Road, those seem to be the 4 priorities for them to look at, in my view at least.
And David, the other thing, if we're talking about market rate development in some of these areas, or something, quasi-governmental, like a partnership of some sort, we also have to consider at least the property up north of Brown. I remember it was like 2004, 2005-ish when we had the big uranium in the water scare. And I know that there has been documented cases of high levels of uranium in the water table in that general area. Maybe this applies to all of the properties we're looking at and considering, just because we're in New England rocky soil. It depends where you spike that well. But I do recall that particular area, we had to involve Connecticut Water, which I guess is now Aquarian, or is going to be, or something. And it could add expense to any development of property for marketable use.
No, we've already had that conversation. As a matter of fact, I've already passed that on to TPA about the history of that. And Mike Harkin is well aware of that. He was involved in a lot of those remediations before, actually. So, yeah. The good news is that of those 4 or 5 sites we're talking about, 3 of them, 2 or 3 of them have Connecticut Water Company supply. So that helps there.
I mean, I think one of the Connecticut Water it's not, I mean, they're basically managing a giant well for the communities, right? And we've had some issues.
I think that's what they're doing at Legend Hill.
That's what
I think
they're
that's how
doing,
they
yeah.
fall.
It is, and I,
Yep, you're
Yeah.
correct.
parcel, but there is water issues out there, and there's been impacts in the neighborhood at time with drought and things like that. So it is something that, as we look at development, possibly, density and everything else, I think water, a conversation with Connecticut Water is going to be important. Because they're very much dependent on the same veins that all the wells are drilled into, all the private wells up in that area. So the water's not coming from anywhere else, it's coming from, it's just a well, it's just functionally how it all works, but So I think those are gonna be important conversations about development options. And you mentioned market rate. I think that, as we go forward with, the conversations, the Affordable Housing Committee is obviously asked the town to look at sites as well. These are all factors about density. So are we gonna have a way to measure, will TPA be able to say what would be more appropriate for?
Yes,
That's
so for
okay.
example, they're looking at the intensity of
Yeah.
development, what the site can support.
Okay,
Can it support 10 apartments? Can it support 50? Or
Right.
can it support 3 houses or 10
Right,
houses?
right,
So
okay.
that's gonna be the outcome would be a kind of it wouldn't be any design, but it would say, it'd put a box here and there, and then say, box of this size can go here, a box of this size can go there, and for these kind of functions. So that's kind of what we're thinking of. There was an interesting conversation that came out of our last meeting that Vance and I had. And that was whether we had talked about, the affordable housing kind of ideas. Part of that spared from the expressions of interest in my mind, and it seems to me that there are two sites that are not in our purview right now that might be appropriate. And that is the old train station on corner of Bradley and Wall. Behind that's still owned by, I think it's still owned by Amtrak. As I looked at it, it's still owned by the Connecticut.
Vistas or?
No, the one right behind the Jaume.
Oh, you're talking about the empty lot.
Yeah, it's an empty lot.
It is, it's all Amtrak, yeah.
It's all
It's
over
all
there.
Amtrak,
And I also looked at the existing train station, because when we built it, when I was on EDC,
Yeah,
I believe we put the pillars in to put a parking deck there. That was our plan as part of the Bradley Road vision statement. And so the core question that Vance raised, I thought was fascinating. Could you build
yeah,
a parking, a deck
Yeah.
above the parking lot with apartments of affordable workforce housing there? That property is owned by the state, though.
yeah.
That's
Well,
not
you
owned
know,
by
the
the,
train station,
where the existing train station is. Yeah.
we're gonna be having a public hearing in February for the second platform at that train station, so. But yes, we've seen that, one of the proposals from Academy did suggest that, right? That was one of the concepts that some of us presented. And then there are other developments I've seen throughout town, or throughout the state that are doing that. Putting,
So the question is, I don't know who we should talk to about something like that.
Yeah. I mean, that is I mean, I can start having those conversations. I think this is what would get into an issue of height and character of the area down there too. But I certainly can reach out, because actually Senator Cohen is the chair of the Transportation Committee.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So, yeah,
David, I thought you mentioned when we talked that the parking lot's actually owned by the town and only the building
I
itself.
thought it was, but I looked at it and it's not. It's owned by
Yeah.
the
Oh,
state.
okay.
I'm pretty sure it's the state, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's definitely owned by the state.
Given the state's current desire to see transit-oriented development, I would think that could still be a very logical place. Modest development, not hundreds of units certainly, but I think given the TOD nature of that, it could be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah,
So that was a fascinating kind of outcome. This
Yeah.
whole thing. All right, any other questions about the existing feasibility studies we're working on? I know since we missed last month's meeting, we kind of jammed, it's almost 2 meetings in 1 year, so I'm sorry this is going a little longer.
I just want to
But-
compliment, I think, the amount of work and effort that's gone in and what we've accomplished so far has been great.
Yeah. We're
So-
definitely on a fast track to
Yeah.
try to have this tied up like mid-winter.
The consultants seem to be on board with that too.
Yeah,
David, the only other comment I want to make pertain to Memorial Town Hall, and I think as we're looking at that, and I know Peggy, you and I have talked about this, particularly as it pertains to septic, but other things, to really look at those 3 buildings plus Academy more in a comprehensive way, since they all kind of integrate into one kind of amazingly interesting downtown development. But again, with infrastructure improvements, and maybe that's a conversation again with David Corus and the Municipal Development Authority, should Madison choose to opt in. But again, I just think that looking at the buildings kind of with a snapshot without looking around them, maybe we're missing something.
I think that's leads into the next
Yeah,
agenda item, which is I'd like to get Peggy's view in terms of how we should be working with the expression of interest in the academy of planning so that
well-
everything's coordinated. I mean, we are the facilities committee.
Yeah, well, this is obviously very complicated conversation for both the board of selectmen and the community. So the board is going to take up kind of how we envision the next steps in this process going. Probably not next week, but probably the week or two after that. I think right now we're all kind of doing our own diligence and thinking this through. I think it would be helpful if there's a perspective that this committee has, a recommendation about how the board should be thinking about this. What steps the board should be taking before it makes a final decision in terms of an expression of interest. So if there is a thought that you, as particularly some of you as professional experts in this area, if your thought is, the board really needs to investigate X, Y, and Z before it picks a path. As a facilities committee, you guys are putting forward a master plan. And I think this holistic planning, which the town has never really done for that section of town, unfortunately, there's a lot of pressure on timing, right? The public wants to see action. It's been 20 years. And so we're trying to balance that to make the right decision and do the right thing and also present something that that makes sense to the public so they can vote on it, right? So balancing that and kind of timing, trying to get things moving quickly, and then this with the planning process, like how would you envision this feeding into that and helping us make that decision?
Yeah, well, the first thing is that I think we have to look at. I don't know. I'm hoping I had asked everybody to try to go in and I sent out the links to the expression of interest presentations that are on the town website. And I'm hoping. I know it's a 4-hour commitment of time.
Very entertaining though, right?
It was very entertaining. I actually sat through them by Zoom, given that our house was full of the flu at that week. But I watched them and I've taken some pretty copious notes on all 4 of those presentations. 2 of the presentations are putting substantive additions to the building. Those additions have impact on moving forward on the Memorial Town Hall. So coordinating with what we're talking about at Memorial Town Hall and the Powder House as well as the chapel, I think is quite important. Understanding how the area infrastructure can be either integrated or broken apart, if you will. I think that's another very important question that we have that's out there at this stage. I did one of the things I thought that was fascinating was that at the last meeting, when the public comments, one of them, I don't know who the woman was, but she stood up and said, we're doing a master plan in town, and I know that's very interesting. Is this integrated with it? So I know that only one of the presenters was there of the 4 to hear that comment. So I just reached out and said, we're a facilities committee because there's other 3, all 4 of them actually. And it's a very milquetoast email that just said, we are the facilities committee. We're developing a master plan. We're thinking about impacting on those buildings. If you want to learn more, go visit our website, MadisonCT.org, and look at our agendas and look at our information. I made no comment whatsoever on the quality of the presentations or anything. Just that this is public information that may be helpful to your thought process and to your evolution of your proposals. So I do think that we need to coordinate. I think we need to share what are some of the potential options, because I think You know, I mean, to some degree, some of the development is extremely complementary to what we're talking about with Memorial Town Hall, the Potter House and the chapel. And there may be a way to integrate and potential funding or integration issues. I mean, when you talk about restaurants and gathering spaces and in the revised academy or market spaces, those are kind of really interesting complementary things to what we're talking about, and would really add to the cultural vibrancy of that whole area of town. On the other hand, we put a 50 or 60, 30 or 50,000 square foot addition to Academy, it kind of closes down the issues when you start talking about adding all that traffic and how do you deal with people and space and parking, septic, all this kind of stuff. It did raise, I mean, I thought there was one interesting question. I think it was, I don't remember who asked it, but someone raised the question about whether and why aren't the fields coming into play. Obviously, we do have other property space in town that could move fields to that might allow those fields to be more developed in a different way. So that I do think that should be another conversation. I mean, I don't want to open up settle wounds, but that's kind of what our job is to do that in this committee, I think, to get a master plan. Because if we could put those fields in another location, that makes a lot of sense.
So
it solves some of those other problems.
I think we went through this a little bit with the schools, right? There was a failed referendum because people didn't understand the bigger vision for the school district, right? There wasn't that plan. So the school district went back and they spent a lot of time deliberating. They came up with a plan, right? So there is a tremendous amount of value to being able to express to people how all these parts are going to fit together, right? And that's the whole goal why we set up the committee 2 years ago and what this has been working on. I think Academy obviously is complicated because of the history and votes and I just think the emotion that it brings up with people, and perhaps the longevity it's been in the public domain. So, but that doesn't mean necessarily that the board shouldn't think bigger picture besides just a silo to one building, right? And that's what we're trying to get away from. We're trying to get away from one decision. Or one building solutions, right? So, I guess the question is, I know and I've not spoken to the board about that, would like to hear thoughts about from this committee with these proposals that we have and what they think could make the most sense, but then what would be the issues that we'd have to address, right? Okay. So, for example, if it was just using the hotel as an example, how would that work? How would we get more parking? How would we, those types of things, the ball field conversation, I think is an important one. And that came up a couple different times. So I think it would be helpful to have some thoughts. I know the EDC is talking about it and they're going to come back with some feedback. Okay. I've asked the Michael Harris of the Rex Development, who's founded the economic development arm of the state, to also come back. He sat through the 4 presentations, give thoughts. So I think if we put this all together, we can maybe develop a way forward. But there's this timing pressure. I think people are just eager to just there's the tear it down people, right? That just want to get it, which I get. They're fed up. They don't want to hear about it anymore. They just want it torn down. Let's move on. But we got to remember that's $3 million plus, right? So, and then we still have an empty space that we have to figure out what to do with. So, and that also plays into your master plan, right? So,
I would think that part of our challenge would be to say, if none of these things is what's the pros and cons of each of the projects and their thoughts, but also and what do you do?
Yeah, I agree with that. There's really 5 prongs there, 4 presentations, and the alternative of total demolition.
Yeah. Which is another which is another alternative.
It was on the table before, but it does. You can't deny there's an interaction between what we're doing and whatever the outcome of this turns out to be. And I agree with what David said. I think at this point, if we don't pursue some involvement in it, we're acting in isolation. And I don't think that's how, so.
I don't think it's the right thing for the town, right? We want
No,
to make, we want to plan. That was the whole goal of this, was to have, now that piece was set before, right? When we came into this, right?
Yeah.
There was a plan for Academy. We already had the family offices solved. We had some, but it opened up other puzzle pieces, right?
Sorry.
So it just, that variable changed now, and so we have to step back and like look at it again. I guess the question is, and obviously as being a member of the Board of Selectmen, I would kind of step back as you have these conversations. I mean, how would you approach this to be as expeditious as possible to come back with some thoughts?
I think we need to pull together as a subcommittee of people that would be involved. And do what we're doing for like Memorial Town Hall. We're just gonna have to kind of put our heads together, review the proposals, and then present those findings. I do think that an important part of our reaction is the next agenda item, which was we talked about at the last meeting, and Vance was brought up in a very creative way about how do we communicate in the town what we're doing as a facilities committee. Because I think if the town has a good perspective on what we're doing as a facilities committee, it may buy a little bit of time to have that intelligent conversation.
Mhm.
And to that end, I started putting together some slides with Vance's help and others' input on here that would kind of say, what would we do? I did meet with Megan in your office, or Madison in your office, and she's prepared to kind of start preparing the website and all that kind of communication stuff. But I think we need to go back out to those various town chamber of commerce, Democrats, Republicans, all the various community type space people and start explaining what we're doing as well. So I think that's the way to answer your question, to kind of how do we integrate? Well, until people understand what we're doing, they're going to say, "Why are you having an opinion?" And so I think if we can share what we're doing with everybody in a reasonable way,
Well,
and then putting those thoughts together as part of our charge, then it ties together.
Right, and I think that this, just what we went through today, highlights how this is all happening, right? How it's all working together. It's a thought, like everything we walked through in terms of, how Jeffrey, how you work Town Hall, how the spaces work. That's why I'm like, from a timing standpoint, I feel like to be able to communicate to the town the results of this exercise, I think gives people more comfort, right? Knowing that there is a bigger plan out there as we make these decisions.
Right. That's why I was thinking, I think it would be helpful for us to go in front of the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen again and kind of give them an
That's what I was gonna
report.
And I was gonna suggest, because I think just even what we saw today in a summary fashion would be a very, very helpful thing. And it might then get them all on board to say, yeah, we gotta make sure before we finalize what we're doing here, it fits in with all of this.
I know we've had an incredibly long meeting, and I want to be sensitive to that for everybody's time. But if I can bring up that slide deck, it's about 10 or 12 slides that would kind of summarize this. I'd love to get everybody's reaction while I have everybody here, and this, because it really ties into this conversation.
Oh, the summary of
what we're doing.
Yeah.
Which one is that?
It's
your
the
PowerPoint.
It's the PowerPoint. And Megan or Vance or John, if you guys want to be involved on this, putting together our view of the expression of interest, welcome your help.
Oh, sure, that's cool.
Absolutely, David.
Great.
Yes, indeed.
All right. Have the three of you done have you looked at the, have you seen the presentations?
I watched them all.
I was there in
Megan,
person.
Oh, so
We're
Vance.
talking about Academy? I'm sorry. We're talking about Academy, right? Or no?
Yeah, we're at the academy.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I was there for both Tuesday and Thursday in person.
Great.
All right,
I do want to
Megan,
talk about
yes.
that. May I rewind? I'm sorry, David. May I rewind for just a second, please? Before you do the slide deck. Two comments. I think one, I would agree, Peggy, with you and David, with what we were discussing, that it does seem incumbent upon us to get together and collaborate on not only on Academy, certainly, and the four proposals, but also I think on the disposition of any other properties we're considering here as we progress through this inventorying and likely disposition of some of them. And to that end, it would seem like the Facilities Committee, Board of Selectmen, Economic Development Commission, Affordable Housing Commission, Planning and Zoning Commission, maybe to have not everybody from everyone, but certainly to have delegates from each of those, so that there is that sort of comprehensive, multifaceted conversation about the properties and what everyone views as their highest and best use and who qualified developers would be. And furthermore, to that same point, then speaking of qualified developers, elsewhere, and I've had relatively limited experience reviewing RFPs and RFQs, and but in each of those cases, when we have in other places where I've done them with municipalities, we've then had references requested from each of to each of the developers or candidates if it happened to be for a consulting position, and we would then vet them with local communities where they've done other work. So I think too, as we progress with Academy and for that matter, when we ultimately may be looking to divest ourselves of other town-owned property, it would seem to me very important that we, in fact, independently contact either maybe Peggy, your counterpart in another community where a developer had done some work, or maybe some other organization in that particular community, just to get an appreciation for how they did. Did they perform on time? What was their history like? What was their experience like? How they fared elsewhere, so that we don't find ourselves in a situation where somebody comes in and we're very intrigued by what they're proposing, only to find out maybe that their background or their experience is not all of what they necessarily represented to us.
Yeah, no, I think there's absolutely another phase of this right now. I feel like the bigger conversation at the board is hotel, housing.
Right.
Nothing, right? Tear it down. Like, I feel like there has to be this broader conversation. Then I think if we pick a path, absolutely, there's gonna have to be a vetting process, I think. And also I think that what the conundrum is you mentioned is there's two groups that have used more than what was actually part of the expression of interest. So then the question is, do we step back? If we pick a path, do we then go back out with much more specificity about what we want? Because it was very broad-based, this EOI, and that was purposeful. We didn't think, we had so many people say the building's undeveloped, right? Tear it down. It's a waste of money. You can't develop this building. So this is a way to test the market. This is what we talked about last summer, to say, can we save it and have it be for some good purpose for the community? So we saw from the marketplace that it can be, and there is some interest in it. So now I feel like we're at a point where if we pick a path, we have to decide what that path's going to look like. What exactly do we want, right? And so that may be a different process than just picking one respondent to the EOI. I think
I think what you're describing, I'm saying, I think applies to any properties we're considering selling, divesting ourselves of, so that if it's the Bower Park property or wherever else it is, the property next to Legend Hill or Ryerson or whatever happens, things that where we may consider selling some of the property, is particularly land that we may not want to develop ourselves. I just would like to be sure that, when it's one thing to see a presentation, it's another thing, obviously, to get a little granular and as you said, to your point, to vet. And I think it's just something we need to be mindful of uniformly, regardless of the particular property.
Right, and I think there has to be like a due diligence practice that we would have to put together about how we would.
Exactly, regardless of the property, it just to apply to any property. Yep.
Right.
Okay,
Of
thanks.
course, if
Sorry to go on.
if we're looking to sell a property, then we lose a certain amount of control over that. If a developer buys a plot outright, then they have the right to develop it within whatever, land use application they put in.
But
I think
there's no reason we couldn't.
The concept that we're
We
talking
could
about
certainly
is
impose some.
Preparing a development plan that says, or an RFP that says, this is property will be used and developed in this way, and we're giving you kind of a head start on terms of the regulatory and town compliance issues by setting it up this way. So that
We could certainly go be. I'm sorry to interrupt. What I was saying is that we
that's
could
kind of
certainly
the
go
way the
beyond
process
whatever
is on about the properties.
that's why we're doing the kind of evaluations we're doing now.
And that's typically how it would be done, right? That's typically what you go out and say, this is what we want, here's all the things and.
Yeah, so we're not really going out and saying, here, this is 10 acres. Who wants to buy it? That's not what we're talking about.
Right, the goal is to
And
have,
I mean, we could go so far as to impose deed restrictions or reversionary provisions. So if people don't perform, or they know they need to perform in accordance with something that's even more specific than what planning and zoning necessarily would call for, because if we have the property and indeed then control of it and have a vision for it, we want to make certain, and I'm probably saying the obvious here, but we just want to make certain that we impose enough guardrails in there to make sure that the outcome is indeed happens in a time frame and a result that's what our vision initially was.
All right.
Agree. I'm going to close this conversation off because I want to get through these 10 or 12 slides quickly and get us all out of here. I've distributed this to the committee members so far, or at least the community members to get their opinions, and so they have copies of it. But I'll be happy, Peggy. I'll get one to you and one Seth. I'll get you one as well. This is totally draft at this stage. Some of our initial thinking is of how, if you're going to go out and explain what we've been doing for the last 2 years, how would you do it? So go ahead. So basically, wanted to let everybody know what's our charge. You've seen this slide. What we're trying to do: compile an inventory of buildings and town land, perform fact finding to understand what these can be used and how they can be used in the future, and then advise the town and the boards in terms of what we should do ultimately. So a quick thing. Next product is what is our approach? Our approach, what we've been doing is inventory all properties. We've evaluate how best to utilize or repurpose it. And that basically takes each property into a retain or a divest kind of bucket. If we retain, you retain an existing use or an adaptive reuse, and then come up with operating capital forecasts. If you divest it, we prepare development plans and then prepare that for marketing, advertising, RFPs, type of deal. What we found that there's 1,217 acres that we have, 82 parcels across the town, which was a surprise to virtually everybody that we made our presentations to. 29 of the properties are over 2 acres, which is 97% of the land. There's only about 267 acres with actual buildings on it of the 1,200. So that's kind of important, just to give some context. The next slide. We have an awful lot. Right now, we're at 19% of our 161,000 square feet of space that when nothing's happening. And that's Academy, Jeffrey, Ryerson, and the Learning Center. And so really want to be very aggressive at that. It's useful to see that government's only 6%, schools are 67%, and the community spaces are 8%. So I was surprised. I didn't realize community spaces were actually more than what the government spaces actually have in town, which I think is an interesting statistic. Our capital needs, we went through the various capital needs. Basically, there's $103 million over the next 7 to 10 years, excluding Academy, that we know in existing buildings need to be spent. And we spend about just under $5 million a year on operations and maintenance in town buildings. When you go down, we have lots of program needs. So I just took these items right off of that matrix slide that I made before that we saw earlier today. What we're doing. Next slide. Our planning goal. Our goal is fundamentally to shift the historical planning from a singular project by project basis into a more comprehensive approach that looks at all facilities and all properties and comes up with an integrated multi-year master plan as a result. Next slide. If you look at what the components are, we're looking at optimizing our land and adding that into optimizing, which is keeping or divesting, which potentially can give us tax funding revenue. That would feed into the master plan. Program needs, which was those list of items that I showed, plus the space assessments, space and reuse will give us capital dollars. All that comes into a master plan that would not only say, what do we want to do, but how we would pay for it. And say what was out, what else is out there to do, what's the gap. Our first action has been, basically define these buildings because they're key adjacencies to the town green. So that was the Academy, Memorial Town Hall, the Powder House, and the Chapel. The vacant schools, Jeffrey and Ryerson, and the town campus, which is the Arts Barn and Learning Center, are all spaces that we need to understand, either change or keep as they are. When we looked at the space assessments, we've hired Antonosi Associates to define the feasibility of restoring Memorial Town Hall. These are pictures of the original design of the building back in the 1896, I think it was. Also, they're tasked with developing an adaptive reuse for Jeffrey and develop what, if any, of the Ryerson School should be used or demolished. Action 2. We've identified vacant and underutilized parcels with the help of the assessor's office. And we kind of, as the committee, we triage the spaces that would be more than 2 or 3 acres of land. So we found basically 16 spaces that was about 300 acres, and we called it down to approximately 160 acres. And about 13% of our town property that we think should be evaluated at this stage with TPA. The land assessments that we engaged the TPA to do, and they're evaluating the suitability of parcels for commercial, residential, or other town uses. The evaluation will define potential from development. I put that example of what kind of assessment. And then we'll be able, from these assessments, develop some type of one-time capital as well as ongoing tax revenue that will feed into the master plan. The chart we looked at, I put in here as a TPA first in very preliminary evaluation. Action 3, which is we want to define the program needs, define feasibility for renovations, and then try to match the adaptive reuse within existing buildings and utilize existing space more effectively. So that breaks out into that preliminary planning matrix that I shared with you all earlier. Next steps. Dive into these adaptive reuse priorities. Memorial Town Hall, returning its design as original assembly space, performance space. Jeffrey, looking at the key adjacencies for offices, specialty classrooms, athletics, performance, or commercial kitchens, or other kinds of spaces. Ryerson, review if part of the school can be saved for adaptive reuse or not. The Town Campus Learning Center, how do you after demolition, what is the potential use of that site? Ridge Road bulky waste site, as well as the Ridge Road parcels that are adjacent. How can that be potential? Is it an opportunity for the potentially residential development or other town uses? And then finally, the other parcels would be that we're looking at residential development, affordable housing, and potential commercial uses. What we know so far is that Memorial Town Hall, I just did a quick summary of the findings so far. Targeting in January for feasibility. Initial code is encouraging, as we talked about, staying within the assembly. And obviously, we have a benefit of being on the historic register of historic places. Next slide. Town And then I just listed those kind of key 6 or 7 spaces that we're looking at. I'm probably gonna have to, I'm not sure the Fort Path was a DPW site, as one-time, first-time owner housing or affordable housing. That's probably not gonna be likely. But I developed this before we had this presentation tonight. Cops Road is really the one spot for affordable housing. We may want to add into this the train station and the old train station and the current train station. Traditional residential housing, Ridge Road, at Ryerson and Brown, those are probably much more traditional market-based housing. And then expanded town use, Ridge Road, Nathan's Lane, and Town Campus. And that's it. So, I did that very quickly. But I just wanted to get, how do we kind of summarize what we've been up to? And it's rough as a first step.
Yeah, I think that's a great first step. I think maybe I'll give some feedback. I think you need to lead with Jeffrey. I think that is what the board wants to hear the most about, and repurposing, because Memorial Town Hall is isolated in some ways, right? It's, you can still do Jeffrey and have Memorial Town Hall just continue to function the way it's functioning. Because that is a new concept, a new project, that the board is not, or the CIP is not adopted yet. So, so I think it would be good to have that conversation start about, look at what you can do with Jeffrey. We can address the family services issue. We can address Board of Ed space, which then helps us with the town, so.
And I didn't have those layouts. Those were all just basically, they all came out today. I mean, those are hot off the press.
Right. And one other thing that I was thinking about, though, is the community concept that, the idea that now that we don't have the community center, which, you're going right down the Board of Ed path, right? Versus should that be community space, a new community center? And then you have, the family. You see what I'm saying? So I think we need to figure out how to address that. I think the Board of Ed thing makes a lot of sense. It's simple, it's offices, but there may be this, well, why can't we have Jeffrey be the community center, right? Since we didn't get it with so just thinking about that, that's another alternative that could be looked at, right?
Right.
But just thinking through about how to do it. But I would definitely lead with that building, because that is the one that's glaring now that, we're putting the stake in the ground. We want to keep the land, right? And we ideally want to keep the building, and there's need for it.
And I think the expression of interest in Academy, when we talked about community spaces, everybody had community space in there.
They did.
Right.
And if you tie that in with Memorial Town Hall, I think that's a way of maybe that we get that in here.
Right.
That those expressions of interest could complement the Memorial Town Hall.
Right.
So lead with Jeffrey, then go to expression of interest that goes into community space. That would.
And then one other thought I had too is addressing the Ryerson demolition. Do you have a slide that talks about demolition?
Not yet. We're
Yeah.
basically, we've looked at, you saw that one slide that basically said demo the back and keep the front and the cafeteria.
But there I think the point with that is.
Or not. And
This is if there's
I'm sorry,
displacement.
we're looking at that right now. They have the structural people
Yeah.
about how costly would it be to harden those interior walls that would be exposed? Because you're changing kind of the footprint. Would you have to put new foundations in, all those kinds of things might come about. So that's where we're at with Ryerson.
Yeah, and I think it would be good to have just a page on Ryerson and said, targeted for demolition, X million dollars, but as part of this process, we're just looking at some alternative things. One of them is the Arts Farm concept came up more if the Arts Farm gets displaced, right? So if it doesn't, we're not gonna go do this if we don't have to move the Arts Farm out of facility. So I'm just trying to think through about, when we know the community conversation, the expectations of the board. I think Jeffrey Ryerson, World Town Hall is now, then that leads into the planning piece for that whole corridor there,
One of the
right?
things that came out of today's conversation was that pre-K is going to if we can solve or address the pre-K to K1 in a different way in the town, we can avoid a new school in the mid 2030s. So that was the demographics of how that works. So that kind of has to play into this conversation.
Yeah, and
Because
you,
one of the concepts was to retain the Ryerson property so as a potential site for a new school. So I don't know,
Yeah.
got to do a lot of work before we figure that out.
I think the one
we're
thing
getting
I've
to that
learned
point.
is that these forecasts, it's a crapshoot in some ways, right? You know, because now we're dealing with a situation where they're reshuffling. I'm sure you've heard this
Yeah,
in the book,
no,
something maybe. So, yeah, but I remember being in the community meetings in like 2015, you know, where there was talk of going to one school, you know, so and there was people pounding the table, declining enrollment, shut the schools, you know, why we have all these buildings. So by the time you get through that whole process, all of a sudden you're turning around and then having to look for potential future expansion. And so,
Demographics are pretty accurate in general. I mean, you know, they're not.
Yeah. But in terms of attractiveness for our
Yeah.
town, that's the factor. I
That's
think
the
people aren't realizing that we've kind of become very popular with younger families, which is a great thing. So we're seeing an influx of that. So, a lot to talk about, but I think it's a great start to something. And then I guess if we were to, do you think that you would be ready to present? I mean, because Academy is such a
I think we ought to keep this on a very fast track.
yeah, I mean, our next Board of Select meeting is the 26th. So this could be a conversation, you know, as a lead up. Or this could
I don't
be
see
on
why
the
we
agenda
shouldn't be able to
26th.
do that. I think we should be able to get this
Yeah.
organized, but then I think we should get our
And it's
Thoughts
supposed
on
to be a
Academy
process too.
tied
I think
together
this is
and
the interim
find this-
update,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So we could present that to the Board of Selectmen and then I think, you know, let's think a little bit about how you envision tackling the academy situation, knowing we have, you know, people waiting for a response, right? And from the respondents, the community wanting to see movement, and how that timeline would work. And I don't have an answer to any of that yet. And you know, it's really, that's what the board has to kind of think through.
Can I add something? I think we kind of, as as a committee, we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place in some ways, in that there's a tremendous advantage to the whole community to do this holistic planning, right? But at the same time, when you present the holistic planning, it looks like a bunch of projects and it smells like a lot of money.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
we're gonna be, you know, ostracized by some quarters as this is crazy. You guys are talking about hundreds of millions of dollars of development. There needs to be some kind of temporal track.
believe that it's a 15 to 20-year plan.
Right.
I mean, I think-
Exactly. Like this is not this week.
At the
Yeah, and
beginning, you know?
it's also all going to be subject to referenda.
20 years, right? This is the roadmap for the town for 20 years.
Yeah.
And these are all gonna be individual projects, but at least they're all going in the same direction and there's a goal in sight. you know?
Definition, what is a master plan?
Yeah,
But if one or two things, but it's so sensitive, this planning, that if one or two things get knocked out by referenda, then you're talking about displacing town offices or, you know,
Yeah.
uses.
oh, that's where sequencing is gonna be important.
Yeah.
And I think there's some things that are gonna force us to sequence. The $4 million state grant. It's not gonna hang around forever. The federal grant, I'm much less optimistic we'll be able to redeploy just because of the nature of that grant. But that grant is kind of sitting there ticking.
If that could be applied into the academy and Memorial Town Hall, possibly.
Yeah, no, there will be an opportunity, I think, to repurpose this in some way, but they have to see that it falls within the goals of the state, right? So it's a DCD grant also. So that's where I think we've got to And I think they're gonna wanna see that the community really wants this, and there's endorsement of whatever it's repurposed for,
So
right?
we should put in that input to the master plan grant monies.
Yeah.
That we have the current
Yeah.
existing.
And all of these things too will end up, and then the other thing that, Seth, I think you just raised a real good point about this is all communication, right? Is we've got the surf club process going.
Right.
So that has to factor into this broader master plan too. We're making some facility decisions, right? So what comes out of that plan process will feed into, you know, is that gonna be venue, event space? Is that gonna be, you know, we're talking about, you know, do we make that much more or do we keep it small? You know, and that's a dollar figure that everybody will start going.
So we probably should kind of organize this to short-term, mid-term, long-term
Yeah,
kind of perspectives
Yeah,
as well.
I mean, I think it's a great, just to talk about how important this is. And you know, and the good thing is the town really embraced the strategic planning process we went through. And I understand it's very high level ethereal stuff, but there was a lot of excitement and input into that. So if we could start seeing that here a little bit, you know, this is different though in the sense that because everybody's gonna have their pet projects, right? They're gonna have their, you know, their specific building that they care about or their, you know, so.
I'm really hopeful that it becomes a more comprehensive view so that everybody's got something they like and everybody's got something that they don't like. But, you know, it's whether you're going to accept a kind of a combined concept rather than an individual.
That's ultimately kind of how Academy passed the first time because it got enough people that had something they saw positive out of that community center, right? They had their slice they really liked and they were going to go for it. You know, talk another time over a bourbon about why it's passed the second time, but so.
Right.
No, but I think this is a good, perfect timing for the board. Because we have to decide how to move forward on this and, you know, and I'm very sensitive to the fact that people don't want to see more kicking the can down the road. Right? So there has to be like a timeline, a vision, a purpose, and a result, in one way or other for that building.
Megan, I'm going to put you on the spot. What kind of comments would you have about that kind of a communication strategy as the newest, one of the newer members of the committee? Because I know Vance has helped me. I'd like to hear your comments, honestly.
Yeah, I think kind of the short priority list versus the grand plan is going to be a little bit easier for everybody to digest. I think, and me personally, you know, we followed the academy progress and everybody felt a little bit defeated when it got close and then nothing happened. So I think if we can figure out a way to present it in almost a segmented way so people know we're making progress to the big picture, but we could do it in a smaller, more affordable ways, I think we'll get better reaction from the town. And that's just my opinion.
Anybody else have comments?
Showing progress is important.
We've accomplished, I mean, looking back on what we started. I mean,
We have,
you know,
it's just, it may not seem visible all across the different towns,
yeah, but it's quite.
but it is true.
All right, with that, we're gonna move on to the last item. I got public comments. We have one member. I don't know if we have anybody online.
Did you want to review the dates, accept the dates?
We voted on this.
We did.
Okay, you got.
We voted on those right at the beginning.
I got you. Okay, I'm all set.
Yeah,
All right.
Is anybody online?
We have one person online.
Okay, so we have one person in attendance, so if you can give us, if you have a public comment or want to give one, give us your name.
I
and,
haven't talked it all night, but it's been a long night for all of us. We won't do that. So, just Robert Letzkis, 32 Hathaway Lane, Madison. I'm one of the respondents for Refine Living that responded to the expression of interest and made the presentation last Thursday. This is fascinating to me because really understanding the whole dynamic of tying this whole thing together. So, I mean, I think it really makes sense, you know, for what you're doing, because every great thing just doesn't happen in a day. You can't just rush because everybody wants things to be rushed. So I'm good with that. I'm good with being patient and methodical about this thing. Number one. Number two is the theater, as far as, you know, in my presentation, I'm not married to it. So your idea of a theater that I just saw is really awesome. So I really like that. And I think that if you were to able to get that off the ground, I think that would be a hell of a compliment to my development, to be honest with you. I was very mindful of the parking in front with my presentation. I didn't even offer to take any of that. There's 55 spots on School Street that were, maybe a possible shared parking arrangement. In your vision for the theater, do you see it open at night, during the day? What are your thoughts on that?
Right now, we're looking at it more of a performance type space, so, we're thinking of it for more evening kind of things. We're open though to having kind of ideas of the concept of being able to move all the the seating to make that one big open space, opens that up for other kind of functions that maybe weekend days, that kind of stuff.
Got it. Okay, yes. The marketplace that I proposed would actually close at night. So that helps loosen up the parking to a certain extent. Now I do have the restaurant, but that complements the theater. So that's number one. Number two is the septic. I don't know how big the septic is for the Memorial Town Hall right now, as far as the tank is concerned. But the reality is I have use in my proposal for 300 short-term guests, which you have 5 gallons, and I tried to check this out with Trent, agreed on this, from the health department. So I have room in my septic that if you needed to tie in, we could have a conversation about that too. So, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts here, but I think for the most part, it all, I do this in other municipalities. I'm a resident here, so I'm able to make public comment, but in other municipalities, I actually sit in on a lot of the committees. Like as a non-resident, they actually allow me to come in and because I'm, one of the bigger developers in town. So I'll be here month to month with you guys. This EDC Academy, if there's a committee for Academy, affordable housing, I'm here. So.
Great, thank you. Are there other public comments?
Nobody else has their hands raised.
Okay. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you.
Right.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you all for.
2.5 hours.
I know that's
But of course, we didn't have